real quickly, on the note of the presidential debates, this is actually a question that we got here on Twitter from Crossfari. Um, if you were to get into the presidential debates, what issues would you try to bring up?
Interesting. I would bring up the issues where there's death that is taking place as a direct result of what Trump and Biden and the Democrats and Republicans are doing. I mean, there's just something about death that gets my attention, and I think it gets people's attention. I mean, for example, if you take the Federal Reserve, we all know it's a bad system. They're plundering and looting people surreptitiously. They're blaming it on, the private sector when the prices start rising and so forth. But there's no real death taking place here. Number one, foreign policy. I mean, Donald Trump has turned out to be just another pro-death candidate or president. And Biden would be another pro-death president. I mean, and the Republicans are really kind of amusing about this because they pride themselves on being pro-life. Well, it's only pro-life if it's an American unborn baby. If you take a born baby that happens to live in Yemen or Afghanistan or Iraq, they couldn't give a hoot for that baby, and who's born, and they couldn't care a hoot for his mother who happens to be pregnant. They'll drop the bombs there too. I mean, they bombed wedding parties. Think of all the people they have killed in Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen and Syria and Somalia. None of them have come over to invade the United States. I mean, what is all that interventionism for? What's the purpose of it? All that death and suffering that they've inflicted on people overseas. I mean, even if you bring up 9/11, it was just retaliation for the killings that they had been doing before 9/11 over there, including all those children, born children. Now, they were Iraqi children. They weren't American children. Hundreds of thousands of them they were killing with sanctions during the 90s, during the Clinton administration, a Democratic regime that professes to love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged, which is their excuse for the welfare state. So foreign policy, number one, along with the sanctions that we've already talked about, the embargoes, the trade wars. I mean, people are dying because of this government, and they don't deserve to die. I would bring all those troops home from everywhere, and stop trying to start new wars. I mean, this was so bizarre about this guy. He's not satisfied with being a death machine in those countries. He's now starting to start a war with Iran so he can kill more people there. He's now sending warships to Venezuela so he can kill more people over there. Okay, number one, foreign policy. Number two, the healthcare system. Now, you remember, guys, when we were doing this show before the coronavirus crisis, healthcare was sort of lower on my list of priorities. But I've argued for 30 years that the solution to the healthcare crisis, ongoing healthcare crisis, perpetual healthcare crisis, there was only one solution to this, none others. We published a book at the Future of Freedom Foundation, where I've served as president since 1990. And I emphasize they don't endorse my candidacy. They're a nonprofit. But we published a book there in 1994 called The Dangers of Socialized Medicine, where there was already a healthcare crisis back in the 90s. And we said the only solution to this is separate healthcare in the state. There's no other solution. You can rack your brain. You can pull together the biggest team of professional healthcare providers in the world. You can get the most brilliant people. You can put them in a room with the most powerful computers, and it wouldn't make any difference. That you've got this crisis because of these socialist programs called Medicare and Medicaid. And that as long as you leave those programs intact, you're going to have a crisis. And nobody believed us. Well, I should say nobody. Our supporters believed us, but the mainstream didn't believe us. But year after year, the crisis continued. But it was an esoteric debate. It was like, Jacob, you could be wrong. And well, I wasn't wrong. I mean, the crisis kept going year after year. That was why they passed Obamacare, because the crisis was so bad, they needed to do something. And then, of course, that didn't work, and I knew it wasn't going to work. So then that now they moved to full-fledged socialism, like in Cuba, North Korea. So that was before the Corona crisis, where I kept saying, this is the only solution, people. There's no other solution. You got to get rid of these socialist programs if you don't want a healthcare crisis. And by crisis, I'm including the out-of-control costs of healthcare. I mean, everybody laments about, oh gosh, healthcare costs are so high. And I keep saying there's one solution to this. Get rid of these socialist programs. And oh, okay. So they keep them intact. Well, then the coronavirus comes, and man, we're seeing this dysfunctionality in full force, because not only do you have these socialist programs that form the foundation of America's healthcare system, you also have a central planning system. Now, central planning is a socialist construct. It is a socialist principle. And that's why you have the shortages of masks and testing kits and ventilators. That's why you have this, what Ludwig von Mises called planned chaos. And nothing's going to work. I will guarantee you, no matter how much these people run around like chickens with their heads cut off, and how many tyrannical controls and curfews and troops or whatever, it's not going to work, because socialism doesn't work. And that's why this issue, I'm going to bring it right to the forefront. If I were in those debates, man, I would be hitting hard on your system is producing death for the American people. Because in a free market healthcare system, sure, we'd still have the coronavirus, but your infection rate would be significantly lower. I mean, this is why seniors, and this is ironic, because I've always, I get attacked by people wanting to abolish Medicare. It's like, oh gosh, you hate seniors. And so here, the irony of it is that this system is now the people who are paying the biggest price in terms of death are the seniors. And I had somebody write me recently and said, oh, well, Jacob, no, they're dying because they have these pre-existing conditions, they're elderly, their systems are weak and so forth. This is nonsense, because they're dying because the infection rate from this pandemic is so enormous. It's like flying blind. It's like flying an airplane blindfolded, that you don't know who's infected. I mean, because the symptoms don't show up for about a week. So during that whole week, a person who's infected is infecting everybody else. Now imagine a free market system where you've got testing kits flooding into people's homes overnight. Amazon, $2 each. You can buy 25 testing kits. Then people are testing every few days. If somebody's got it, he isolates himself. Maybe the family isolates themselves. Everybody else who's well in society continues working. That keeps the economy going. And so the only people who are being isolated are the ones that you really know have this infection, and they're not out there infecting other people. And everybody would be getting along. I mean, nobody wants to die. The healthcare industry would be saying, look, this is what everybody needs to do. We'd all be working together. For seniors that needed help, the younger people. Let me digress here. I know I'm going on a little bit longer with this question, but let me give you a great example. And I know, Eric, you sent me another great example of this phenomenon too. There's an article in the New York Times today about that the British government, asked for volunteers to help out with seniors, because they had like a 1.5 million seniors that under lockdown. So these seniors, they didn't know how they were going to get their groceries. And you can imagine the consternation. Well, we can't go out, and what are we going to do? So the government asked for volunteers. They asked for 250,000 volunteers to deliver groceries and prescriptions, medicines and stuff to these seniors. Take a wild guess how many people signed up. 750,000 people.
Wow.
The flood was so big that the article said that they had to just shut it down because they couldn't handle the flood of volunteers. And it was young people who their businesses had shut down. So they said, we got nothing to do. We'll volunteer. And the point is, I've been criticized that because I want to abolish Medicare and Social Security. And I keep arguing to people, you don't have to worry about seniors. That younger people, doctors, hospitals, everybody bands together when somebody really needs the help. A lot of seniors don't need the help. They got enough money. They're multimillionaires. But those that really need the help, that's what a free society is all about. And what happened right there in Great Britain is exactly what I've been saying would happen here in America if you got rid of these programs. It's like proof, positive. So, okay, a long answer. Foreign policy, healthcare. Third one I'm struggling with, I have a range of choices. I could bring up the Fed, which is so highly destructive, great issue. I could bring up immigration controls. There's death taking place there too. I mean, we've got a police state along the southern border. We've got people dying of thirst crossing the desert in the American Southwest or crossing the Rio Grande. There's that horrible photo of that man and his 3.5-year-old daughter that drowned on the shores of the Rio Grande. It's just horrible. And then back of 18-wheelers of asphyxiation. So there's a lot of death and suffering there. So that's a possibility. The whole mandatory charity program I would bring up with these people, because really with mandatory charity, they're saying to the American people, you're a bad people. You're not like those English young people. You're a bad people. You can't be trusted with freedom. We got to force you, American young people, to take care of your parents and your grandparents and other people in need. Because if we set you free to make that decision, we know what you would do. You would just turn your backs on people. And unfortunately, a lot of young people have internalized that and they believe it about themselves. So I believe in younger people. I have no doubts that you could dismantle these socialist programs today and people would come forth. Young people would step up to the plate and help parents and grandparents and people in the community that help need assistance, like just happened in Great Britain. So those are my principal issues that I would bring in, and notice that they're totally opposite to what these guys stand for. I mean, income taxation, another thing, which funds the whole welfare warfare state. Abolish it. Leave people free to keep everything they earn and decide for themselves what to do with it. Then people would have savings. They'd have a nest egg for things like this that happen. And of course, the whole national security state. I think that needs to be brought up, bringing all the troops home, discharging them, and then working on getting rid of the CIA, the NSA, the military-industrial complex, and restore a limited government republic with just a very small basic military force. Now we're talking about a genuinely free society, and that's the positive case that I would be making to people, that this is what freedom's really about. If you don't want a free society, stick with Trump and Biden and bear the consequences, because now you got your vote, and your vote's going to mean life or death. You stick with them, but don't be too surprised when you get the same results that you're already getting. You want out of these crises? Join up with us, libertarians.